not an established concept in subtitling. It's not something that companies or subtitlers would have implemented. It's an idea that a few colleagues of mine and myself have come up with, and because my background is in subtitling, I am trying to apply this general translation concept into the field of subtitling, where I think it might work quite well, and I'd be interested in hearing your reactions to it. But the idea is that usability and user-centeredness could be kind of used as a complement to a traditional quality assessment, and could bring a more audience-focused viewpoint to assessing when subtitles work and when they don't work, what kinds of criteria are important in assessing what kinds of subtitles we should be making. So I think I should start by explaining very briefly what usability is. Okay, I'm sorry, I muted myself. But you haven't missed anything. We're starting from the basics. We're starting from usability, which isn't a translation concept to begin with. It comes from product design and the engineering world, so more technical area of life. And the ISO standard defines it as the extent to which a product can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction in a specified context of use. So how easy is it to heat my food with this microwave oven? Can I do what I want to do with a product or a system? And what we started thinking about, and some other researchers had kind of thought along similar lines before us, is whether usability could also be used as a benchmark for texts and specifically translations. And that's why and how we came up with the model of user-centered translation. I have the book here if anyone wants to take a look later. So the idea is to think of text and translations as something that we use for a purpose. We often talk about a purpose for translating something. So if a translator has a purpose in mind for why they do the translation, then the reader also has some sort of purpose for reading it, whether it's about being able to use something with the help of translated user instructions or using administrative texts for administrative tasks or something like that. So usability could be a way of understanding the target audience, how they approach the text and what kind of text they need, what kind of translation they need in order to do with the text what they want to do with it. So our definition for UCT is that information about users is gathered iteratively throughout the process and through different methods. And this information is then used during the process to create a usable translation. Not just for anyone, but the idea is to try to understand who the users for this specific translation are. So directing the translation to those users for a particular context in which they use the translation and for particular purposes, why they are using it. So we don't have to serve everyone in every possible context, just the kind of the main idea of what this translation is for and what the people are using it for. And we thought that this might be a helpful complement to quality assessment, because quite often quality is a bit of a thorny concept, that it can be subjective. What someone thinks is a good translation may not be true to another. So if we're able to think in a more controlled way about, so if we have a negotiation about what this translation is for and does it serve that purpose, then that would give a, maybe not objective, but a kind of a more tangible way of assessing the translation, or at least complementing the quality assessment systems. There are lots of them that are very good and very useful, and that bring this kind of an objective framework to quality assessment. I'm not trying to criticize them, but this could just complement them by looking at use and kind of narrowing down how this translation is to be used. This looks a bit complicated. I'm just showing you this and not explaining all the different bits of it, but this is how we try to depict a user-centered translation process. So it's circular because we get information from the users during the process, and then we feed it into the translation before we send it out into the world. And there are different methods we can use to increase usability, like first, simply discussing what the translation is being used for and creating a specification on that basis, using mental models to try to figure out who the users are and what they're like, using heuristic evaluation or expert evaluation to have this kind of checklist of usability principles that we want the text to fulfill, and maybe even using actual readers of the translation to test it before it's published. There would be a lot more that I could say about that, but I'll move on so that we get to the actual point of subtitling. So why I'm talking about subtitling beyond the fact that I like them and I'm interested in them and I have a background in them, but I do actually think that subtitles are an interesting case of a use text. A text that is used for a specific purpose. We don't just read subtitles randomly. We watch them in the context of the film that they are for, and we watch them for the purpose of understanding the film or the program, being able to follow it as it moves on, and just getting whatever information or entertainment out of it that's intended. So they have a set purpose always. So that already kind of puts them in a use category. And it's also interesting, and it has become clear from the previous talks as well, that we are kind of asking a lot of the viewers when we put subtitles in front of them. They have to, and research shows that viewers tend to develop these sort of viewing strategies. They may not realize it, but you have to be able to navigate all of these different sources of information on screen. I have an example from Netflix, and I decided to pander to the audience, even though I don't speak Danish, and choose the Danish subtitles. So this is from the series Heartstopper, and the point here is that there are lots of different pieces of information on the screen. There are two images side by side. There's probably some sound in the background, possibly even narration. So there could even be spoken information there. And then the two characters are texting each other. And there's written English source language text on screen. And then there's the Danish subtitle on top. And there's even, there's the verbal information in the subtitle, but then there's even beyond that, it's been written in capital letters. So there's a point it's making by using capital letters that it's now depicting the writing on screen. So the viewer has to kind of figure all of this out on their own. You don't get a course in watching subtitles. So that is kind of, that requires them to construct a strategy for how to do this. And that also, in my mind, puts subtitles in a use category. You have to figure out how to use subtitles to understand what you came here to understand. And also, as we've heard today, and as we all know, readability and kind of the audience perspective is already often being used as an argument for quality assessments, as a consideration in talking about quality. So in that sense, it kind of makes sense to go even a step further and really think about usability and kind of give a face to the users even more than we have so far. So that's why I think it makes sense to talk about usability. But how would we do that? How do we transport this engineering concept into subtitles? And here's one idea. Jakob Nielsen is a guru in usability engineering, and he has put together this list of 5 elements of usability that I am now trying to turn into subtitling usability elements. So first of all, there's learnability. And in engineering or product design, it means how easy it is to learn how intuitive a product is, how easy it is to learn to use it, how easy it is to know which button to press so that the microwave oven heats your food. Then there's efficiency, how efficient, quick, painless it is to use something. Memorability, how easy it is to remember when you use the same microwave oven a second time. Do you remember how you're supposed to use it, or do you have to learn it all over again? Errors or error prevention, how easy it is to use the system without making errors, or do it easily without sort of going in the wrong direction first and then trying again. And finally, satisfaction, how pleasant it is to use something. So these may not naturally sound like subtitle characteristics, but bear with me. Learnability, well, we don't, like I said, we don't take a course in watching subtitling, but we do still have to learn. When we start watching a subtitled program, we have to kind of figure out how these subtitles are informing me. So I think that it could be considered learnability to see how easy it is to kind of get into the flow of the subtitles. Are they comfortable to follow? Are they easy to follow? Is it easy to navigate between the different sources of information? Like, for example, are they timed accurately so that you know who's speaking and when they're speaking and are able to kind of still follow the program at the same time? Are they segmented appropriately so that it's easy to kind of follow the point of the language? And they are learnable. If it's easy to do that, it's easy to learn how to follow the subtitles. Efficiency, we don't want to be speed readers, but in subtitling, I think efficiency means that in the time that they are on screen, am I able to read them well enough and understand them well enough in a brief enough time so that I can watch the rest of the program as well? That's very important, as we heard. Memorability, we don't necessarily need to think about how viewers remember how the same subtitle should be watched a second time over. But we would want them to be able to watch subtitles, because often you watch a lot of subtitle programs. So when you start watching something with subtitles, you might want it to kind of the formatting to ring a bell, that this is how subtitles usually look like. These are following regular norms and conventions, so they meet my expectations. I immediately know how to watch them. It's easy to get into it. I don't have to learn every time all over again how to watch these subtitles, but I can use my previous knowledge of what subtitles are like. So it kind of goes hand in hand with learnability, but learnability is sort of within a program, and then memorability is whether it follows kind of established rules. Errors is more obvious, I think. But even here, there's a usability twist, because we don't necessarily need to emphasize a conversation about sort of mistranslations or where there are differences in meaning or things like that. We want to focus on those differences that are a problem to the user, that may cause misunderstandings of the program or disrupt the viewing, like make the viewer sort of stop and wonder, well, what was that? And then that's a usability error. And satisfaction, I think, is... Oh, sorry. Satisfaction is quite obvious. We want to be satisfied watching a program. We might not like the program, but we want to be comfortable with the subtitles themselves. And if it's a comedy, we want it to make us laugh. If it's a drama, maybe we want it to make us cry, but it's all part of this kind of user satisfaction. So I think these could be used to have a conversation about what subtitles are supposed to be like, and foreground the user's perspective. This is what you're supposed to get out of them, and find this complement to just thinking about the quality of the text, but also think about the context in which they are being used, and what you're supposed to be getting out of them, and use these terms that may be a bit foreign to translation, but are actually quite widely used around us. So maybe there's a way to sort of add to our credibility by speaking the same language as engineers, for example. So to finish with, I try to bring this all to practice at least a little more, and give some suggestions or ideas for how these sorts of UCT approaches could be used in practice, both for subtitlers and subtitling agencies or TV channels or whoever kind of is the client of the subtitler and distributes subtitled material. First, for subtitlers, well, first of all, the 5 elements of usability that I just described, you could maybe consider them in your work or in your discussions with colleagues or in assessing others' work and trying to visualize the viewer in that way. And the fundamental question is, can viewers use these subtitles for the purpose for which they were intended? And if not, then what are the problems, and how can I sort of get to the bottom of what the problems are and how they need to be fixed? There are also individual tools in the UCT models that individual translators can use, I think, quite easily, and that are familiar to us. One of them is a persona, which is which just means this like a model reader or this like archetypal user of your translation. Who would be like, how would you describe a person who would be a typical viewer of this film? What kind of subtitles would serve them well? And then you have this mental image of an actual user rather than like a faceless mass of the audience. And then it might be easier to make decisions with that person in mind. And there are other mental models that try to make sense of the audience in some similar ways. I also mentioned, when we looked at the process model, I mentioned heuristic assessment or expert assessment, which is fundamentally based on a checklist of usability principles. We often use like style guides or checklists to go through translations anyway, and those could be geared towards usability and trying to put together basic usability principles that are important for subtitles, and then use that to kind of revise your translation. As far as I know, there are no subtitling heuristics, but we did create a general translation heuristics list in this book, and I would be very interested in trying to develop something for subtitling based on that. And also, we think that this sort of user-centered model could be useful for translators more visibly acting as advocates for their audience and speaking on audience's behalf and kind of trying to represent what the viewers want if the other actors in the subtitling process sometimes maybe forget that a little. So kind of having concepts to talk about using subtitles and the user's needs might be helpful in having these public conversations about subtitling and quality. And then on the agency side, well, my dream would be that someone would want to adopt the entire model and try to do user-centered translation, maybe use that as a selling point for showing that we are doing like high-end work and we really care about our audiences. Maybe not realistic for everyone, but it's an idea. Yeah, one can dream. And even if you don't adopt the whole model, you can still use this like usability ideas in negotiating with clients, and in that way, not just talking about technology or efficiency, but also remembering that these subtitles are meant to be used by an audience and have at least some conversations about usability principles when sort of signing a deal. I'd also love to see someone at least occasionally experiment with actual viewers and have like a test audience and see how subtitle programs work, and that would provide so much valuable information for future projects, and maybe academia could be a partner in this. And finally, I haven't talked about translation technology very much, but I think that sometimes sort of companies can be quick to adopt technologies just because they think that, okay, they make things quicker and cheaper. But if you have a reminder of the user's point of view, then maybe you can make more sensible decisions and try to figure out whether these technological innovations might provide usability problems, which they often do. And I would like to refer here to some research by Jan Pedersen and Hanna Hagström. There was a blog post published today on the Subcom blog about that, and it was interesting to note that some of the issues, the quality issues that came up in machine-translated and post-edited subtitles were especially to do with readability. So it was the issues were on the audience, on the user's side. So if you know that, then maybe you can try to kind of limit the damage and have that conversation and see when and how it makes sense to use machine translation and when it becomes a usability problem. And that's been one intention of this model, to kind of have this more fully rounded conversation about the translation process where the audience actually has a face and a voice, and sometimes, and quite often, we would like that voice to be the voice of the subtitler who speaks for them, because quite often subtitlers are foremost experts in their audiences and actually have the know-how to say sort of what the viewership is and how they use the subtitles and how to best serve them. And also they are maybe in a position to, if they don't have all the expertise in the audience, to build that expertise through like maybe collaboration with academia or by kind of sort of including this sort of these discussions in their work and being part of the process of deciding how to serve the audience, and basically just having a fuller discussion about what it means to serve an audience. And this goes back to Pablo Romero Fresco as well, and this idea that translation should be a bigger presence earlier on in the process of creating audiovisual content. So that's it. That was a bit of a general overview, but I would be interested to hear what your thoughts are.